Welcome to the Online Strength Coach Podcast, episode 59, Rocks, Pebbles, Sand and Water. How's it going? Welcome to episode 59 of the Online Strength Coach Podcast. Today is the 25th of November 2015. Today's topic is expounding upon an article that I posted yesterday on cast iron strength. So the idea from the article came from a podcast that I was listening to yesterday. The name of the podcast or the show where this certain episode was on the Side Hustle podcast. If you're interested in starting your own business, or you're interested in starting a sideline, making money in your spare time, doing what some people refer to as hobbies for profit, then I can highly recommend the Side Hustle podcast. It's an excellent show. They interview, the thesis of the show is they interview someone who runs a successful side hustle or a successful side business. And sometimes these are people who run blogs, who are full-time office workers, but they happen to run a successful blog. Sometimes they're people who've had an idea. For example, there was people who had an idea of carry-on handbag or carry-on rucksacks that were size of carry-on luggage for people who did a lot of traveling, and they ended up creating a multi-million-dollar business out of it. But it started off as a side hustle or something that they were doing in their spare time. Anyway, the episode that I'm referring to is called it's called Time Hacks. I'll link the episode in the description. And basically, the girl who they were interviewing specialized in time management, and her business was coaching people into how to prioritize their time, how to get better at time management, and how to increase their productivity. Now, they mentioned a couple of things that kind of chimed with me that I thought would be a good idea for an article or was a good metaphor that really carried over into strength training, fitness training, sports training, or any kind of process where you need to be dedicated, you need to be disciplined, because you're putting in time, you're putting in effort, and you're working towards an end goal. This can be applied to anything. It can be applied to life, really, and it's meant to be applied to life. The metaphor goes, there's a professor who stands in front of a class. He has a jar, and he says to the class, "Is this jar full?" Class obviously no, because the jar is empty. He then fills it with big rocks. He says to the class, "Is the jar full?" Class agree with him, say, "Yes, it is full." Then he takes out pebbles, fills the jar with pebbles. So all of the spaces that were left by the big rocks, or the pockets there that were left with big rocks, are now filled with pebbles. Ask the question again, "Is the jar full?" Class agrees with him. Then he takes sand, and he pours sand into the jar. Now all the pockets of air that weren't filled by the pebbles are now filled by sand. He asks again to the class, "Is the jar full?" Class, of course, agree again. Then he finally takes out water and pours water into the jar, and that soaks into the sand and fills whatever pockets of air weren't left. Now is the jar full? And the class agree, and now it's truly full. So this metaphor was used by the girl on this podcast. I really should have got her name beforehand to give across an idea of time management. So the rocks are the big non-negotiable things in your day. you can't remove. So these are things like work, family commitments, picking the kids up from school. The rocks are the things that you can't remove from your day, because if you remove them from your day today, there will be huge consequences, or there will be negative consequences associated with removing the rocks from your day. So, for example, if you don't go into work today unannounced, there will be immediate repercussions. Could be a warning, or if you don't pick up the kids from school today, or don't arrange an alternative, there will be immediate repercussions, very serious repercussions in that case. So the rocks are the big non-negotiable things in your day-to-day life, or in your life planning in general. The pebbles are the important things, but pebbles can be put off. Pebbles are things like, I'm trying to think of a pebble. I think pebbles might be things for your side hustle. For example, if you have a side business, they might be things that are important, like registering for tax, or registering as self-employed when you're starting a new business. It's important, it's very important, it needs to be done, but it doesn't have to be done immediately today. If it clashes with a rock, then the rock's going to win. So there's time within your day where you can perform pebble tasks. You're always going to have time in your day where you can perform a pebble task and a rock task. Sand tasks are the really fine tasks that are still important, but there's no real huge consequence for not doing them. So, for example, if I'll use me as an example. In my day, my rock tasks would be work. My rock task would be showing up to any in-person coaching I'm doing. My rock tasks would be doing any kind of programming for any online clients, or programming for players, or where there will be repercussions for not doing it. And so lets the person down, lets me down. It shows a lack of service. The pebble task would be things like looking at online at the website, sorting out the forums, producing podcasts, producing web content, producing advertising, doing things that are important, that need to be done, but don't have to be done immediately today, and certainly not at the expense of a rock task. A sand task for me would be replying to YouTube comments, posting on the forums, posting on Facebook, interacting with clients, or answering client emails, or kind of looking at new avenues to take the business, or new ideas for content creation. And then the sand tasks, or the water tasks, are then just like the little kind of nice to haves, or the distractions that you can do. So posting on Facebook, watching YouTube videos, things like that. Like, take up time in your day, and if you got a little snippet and we don't have anything more important to do, you can perform a water task, and that kind of really fills out the day. Now, when we relate this to training, and I did in the article, the rock tasks in your training, and I'm probably going to just narrow this down to lifters, because that end of the day, that's really the audience of this podcast. And if you're more of a fitness person, or you're more of a bodybuilder or a fitness person, then you can still relate this to your day-to-day life. The rock tasks for lifting are your weight training sessions, completely non-negotiable. If you want to get anywhere in lifting, lifting weights is a rock task. Your recovery, namely your sleep, is definitely a rock task. That's a non-negotiable. You need to get good sleep if you want to be as good as you can be as a lifter. Also, as good as you can be productivity-wise. Your nutrition, as in getting enough calories, getting enough protein, that is as a rock task. That is a non-negotiable. Something you should seriously be looking at if you're not already. Then that's really your rock tasks as a lifter. There's no huge amount of other things you need to do if you want to be a successful lifter. If you have a good program, or your good program's definitely a rock task. Let's say you lift regularly with enough volume, enough intensity to progress. You have a good program. You get minimum of 8 hours sleep a day, and your nutrition is 80% there, as in you eat enough calories, you eat enough protein, you eat enough carbohydrate to recover, you eat enough fat to be healthy. If those things are on point, then you pretty much are 90% or 95% the way there to become as good a lifter as you can be. If you apply that consistently, as you have your rocks in place every day, then your fitness goals will pretty much happen, or your strength goals will happen, or your athletic goals within powerlifting or weightlifting will happen. Now you look at your pebble tasks. So pebble tasks within lifting, things like mobility work, things like... So yeah, I was tempted. I was discussing this with myself when I was looking at the article, whether I would include supplementation as a pebble or as a sand task. Then I decided to include it as a sand task. So at the end of the day, I don't actually think it makes that much difference. But what I did decide to include in this place was optimization of nutrition. Now, when I say optimization of nutrition, I mean once the rocks of your nutrition are in place, once you have your calories on point, your protein on point, your macronutrients on point, and you're consistent with your diet, once those rocks are in place nutrition-wise, then you can start looking at the pebbles of nutrition. That is your micronutrient content, the timing of your nutrition. All that is very debatable. Those two things, so micronutrient content, are like your 5 a day, get enough antioxidants, get enough vitamin C, vitamin D, get enough iron, get enough, like, these things are important, like having a varied diet, really. Some people would include this as a rock, but I'm looking at this from purely from a performance standpoint, not from a health standpoint. So as in actually just being able to lift heavy weights or be a good strength athlete. If you have that rock of, you have enough food, you have enough protein, and you have enough macronutrients to have enough energy to train well, then the micronutrients, although they are rocks for your health, they're not really rocks for performance. They're not going to make a huge amount of difference, really. As long as you don't have rickets because you're not having any vitamin C in your diet, then it becomes a bit more of a rock task. But they tend to be more tuning, and certainly things like the timing, they're very spurious as the actual benefit you're going to get from that. As in, there's a slight smidgen of suggestion that eating after training is beneficial for these reasons. There's certainly, if you train twice a day, then timing of eating becomes a lot more important because you need to replenish glycogen stores. Or if you're an athlete and you do a conditioning-based session in the morning and then you have a technical session at night, then you need to be eating carbohydrates to replenish muscle glycogen, or else you're going to be awash in your technical session later in the day. Also, if you train a lot, like you train twice a day, 5 days a week, then nutrition and timing of nutrition becomes extremely important. For most lifters, however, though, we train once a day, probably 3 to 4 days a week, so our timing of nutrition isn't really important, to be honest. As long as you're hitting the rocks, you're hitting the big hitters, your rocks in place and the pebbles. You can look at them and they are important, but they're not going to be mission critical. So your mobility, your prehab as well, so like glute external work, glute activation work, external rotators of the shoulders, core work, lower back work. These are pebble tasks. They aren't going to be mission critical, but they are very important, and you should do them, but never at the expense of a rock task. So really, there's 3 pebble tasks I reckon within lifting. I think I listed 4 in the article, but I think 3 is pretty good. Nutrition optimization, mobility, flexibility, and your prehab. You can maybe also include, I think I did include, recovery strategies. So that's things like ice baths, heat treatment, skins, things like that might make a difference. If you find if you get a placebo effect out of them, then they definitely are a pebble task. And you should pay attention to them. And you should do them. If you don't believe in them and you don't get a placebo effect, then they're definitely not pebble tasks. They're probably sand or water tasks for you. Probably more so water tasks. And then you get the sand tasks. This is the grainy detail, the things that might make a difference, but if you leave them out, certainly are not gonna. They're not gonna determine whether you reach your end goal or not. So supplementation was in here. Again, recovery strategies can go in here. And then things I put in here, like very specific assistance work. So if you feel, I'm missing bench presses because my triceps aren't big enough, they're not strong enough, then I think some people could argue that was a pebble task. I'd probably put this in a sand task. that ultra-specific sort of work where you're looking at yourself, you're looking at the fine detail of your lift. And if you are an accomplished lifter and you've got the rocks and the pebbles in day-to-day, then this kind of sand task can make a difference. So minute detail or minute assistance exercise analysis. Also within this, I put in lifter education, so things like listening to this podcast, reading websites, reading T-Nation, reading ebooks, watching lifter interviews. These are like sand tasks that really aren't mission critical. They will help some lifters, certainly people who are self-coached. This will help a lot, but then I could probably put getting a coach as a rock task really for most people, because that will make a hell of a lot of difference. Not for some people, it's not financially feasible, or there's none nearby, or you don't want to do online coaching or whatever it is. So I would say that's a rock task for most people, though. It's certainly a pebble task, but like self-education, lifter education, sand task, fine detail, and definitely not mission critical. Supplementation, self-education, and very specific analysis or very specific assistance work. These are all kind of sand tasks. And then the water tasks, these are the things that most people fill their jars with. It's talking on Facebook, going on lifting forums like the MISC, going on tnation.com in the comments section, interacting with people online, watching videos, posting videos on YouTube, Instagram, Instagains, talking to lifters on Twitter, spend time on Twitter. These are all water tasks. And I'd be willing to bet that minimum 90% of people who listen to this are 90% of people who have access to the internet and are lifters probably spend more time on water tasks than they do on rock tasks. So what does that say about your lifting? If you actually think about the ramifications of that, if you spend 12 hours a week on MISC, getting that post count, getting them reps, do you even lift? If you spend 12 hours on the MISC and you spend 5 hours in the gym, can you be surprised if you're not really getting the progress you want? Or if you spend 12 hours in the MISC, spend 24 hours in the gym, would you be better off spending those 12 hours stretching, rolling, looking at your nutrition, meal prepping, or maybe spend time with your family and kids, I don't know. But yeah, I thought it was a real neat kind of metaphor for putting your priorities in place when it comes to lifting. Because I think it's certainly something that a lot of people fuck up when it comes to training, certainly within health and fitness, definitely within lifting. A lot of people don't prioritize. They don't, like, they'll go to the gym, but like, what are your rock tasks in the gym? What's the rock tasks in your gym program? If you're a powerlifter, your rocks are squat, bench, and deadlift. Would you be better off, instead of going to the machine room and spending 30 minutes in there, would you be better off spending 30 minutes doing some technique work on deadlift, or doing some technique work on squat, or doing some technique work on bench press, trying different setups? Do you think that would be a better spend of your time? No. When it comes to that's probably a good way. Another one I could do maybe would be within the program. Maybe that's more content for another day. But certainly, it is I think it's a very useful analogy, and something that I certainly would encourage people to look at. Spend some time, get a piece of paper, get the headlines: rock, pebble, sand, water, and then look at your weekly spend of time when it regards to training, your goals. Prioritize your goals at the top. Give yourself 3 goals you want to achieve within health and fitness or strength training within the next year, or within the next 6 months, or within the next 3 months. Give yourself a finite period to set those goals, and then set out your rock tasks, set out your pebble tasks, set out your sand tasks, and then set out your water tasks that are going to help you achieve those goals. And then before the start of every week or the start of every day, get your rocks in place. Then maybe look at your pebbles, and maybe look at your sand, and if you want to, look at your water. But certainly don't not plan, because at the end of the day, what's going to happen if you don't plan? Then you're going to fill your day with water, and that's going to lead to nowhere. You're going to drown. All kinds of analogies going on. But yeah, I thought that was a very useful little bit of metaphor, and something that I think a lot of lifters, fitness people can certainly take away and learn a lot from, or sort of look at your life in that kind of metaphor, in that context, and start prioritizing what's important when it comes to your strength fitness, health-related goals. That'll conclude this podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm going to persevere with getting all of these episodes on SoundCloud, so that's going to be a bit of a more lengthy task than I had appreciated, but I'll get on with it. If you have any questions, comments, as per usual, please leave them below in the YouTube comment section. Please send me an email if eventually this is on the internet as a podcast, or you're listening on iTunes. Please shoot me an email, speedpowerperformance@gmail.com, with any questions, queries, or concerns you have. Thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe. Yeah. This is Mark, signing out. Until next time, have a good day.
Last night was